Okay, we have already few people in the room. Welcome, everybody. We will give a couple of minutes for everybody who registered to join. Just a quick reminder, we will also mention it afterwards. Hello, hi, it's nice to see some faces. This meeting will be recorded, so in case you're not okay with that, please feel free to switch off your camera. There's not a problem for us. This is gonna be an interactive kind of webinar. We would like you to express yourself, to share your comments. So feel free to drop a comment in the chat whenever you feel like to. And I'm not sure you can also switch up your mic. Probably we disabled this in order to avoid, background noises all of a sudden. But we will see. And thank you for being with us today. Hello, Conrad. Okay, 2 minutes and we start. That's okay. I'd say we start, and then when people join, we will welcome them. So hello and welcome, everybody. This is our fourth webinar. We are representing the GreenME project. For those of who are not familiar with the project, our partners today and our panelists will give you a brief introduction, but in a few words, it's an Horizon Europe project which aims to link the benefits of nature to adult mental health and well-being and equity. Today we're going to explore a specific aspect of our project that is linked to what is called in EU jargon Work Package 4, which is aimed at exploring the role of nature in everyday life and nature-based health promotions. We have a few panelists with us today. You see those people with the green backgrounds are the people that are going to present today. We have our work package leaders and partners from UK. We have the University of Kent and the University of Salford. We have Dr. Silvio Caputo, Dr. Richard Belcher, Dr. Sarah Knight, Dr. Eirini Gallou, and Professor Mike Hardman. Thank you for being with us. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of our webinars. We don't want this to be a lecture. We want you to feel free to jump in, to ask questions. It will be as interactive as possible, meaning that we have prepared also some polls and some questions for you. It would be great. It would be great if you could answer and engage. It's beneficial for us as a project, and we don't want to just come here and tell you what we've been doing. We want to see how relevant this is also for your work. So we will start by launching the first two polls. These are usually the standard for our webinars. We want to get to know you. So what is your role and what field of work best describes what you do? And we're going to launch the first poll now. Please take a few seconds to answer to it. Exactly. Then you click submit, and I think we will also be able to share the results of this. Why we do that, usually for us, it's important to see what type of actors and stakeholders engage with our webinars, depending on the topic or depending on, like the type of promotion that we've been doing for the webinar per se. Usually the channels are always the same. Our newsletters and our social media platforms, especially LinkedIn. If you don't follow us, we will share in the chat in a minute the link to our GreenME page and newsletter. Do we see live how many people have already answered to the poll or not? Okay, so maybe we can, I guess everybody, that was pretty straightforward. One thing, if you belong to the other category, please feel free to write in the chat. What would it be? I see, Jakob. We see here. We have 21 responses so far. Okay, people are still voting, so perfect. I'm not sure if you open the chat, if you are able to see the votes coming in live, or if it's something only for the organizers. I'm not sure if attendees are also able to see it. In case not, we have the majority of people coming from research or academia. Okay, oh, thank you, Susanne. Okay, so you can also see it. Some public health professionals, local authority, that would be good to know which type of local authorities do we have in the webinar today. NGO and civil society, great. We have Patricia, who is, leading a project of nature-based intervention in urban nature. Salford City Council, welcome. Wonderful. Thank you. We also have another poll that we will launch now. We can view the results. Okay, we close this one. East Riding Council. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Please keep writing things in the chat. That's great. And we will launch, yes, our second poll. This is more related to the extent of access to green and blue spaces and the relevance that it has in your daily work. Again, please feel free to write in the chat to build on these very short answers if you feel like doing it. Okay. We can definitely say that it's relevant, at least for the 21 people who have voted so far. It's either a core part of their work or sometimes relevant, which is very, very good to know. Wonderful. In the meantime, I will ask our colleagues to prepare the slides. Silvio is gonna start with the core of the presentation, what you're all here for, which is probably not my introduction. So please, Silvio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonella. I hope it runs smoothly and I can make it operated correctly. So I'm Silvio Caputo. I am a researcher in the School of Architecture, University of Kent, and together with Professor Mike Hardman, I lead the Work Package 4, which is a part of this broader project called GreenME, funded by the European Commission, Horizon Europe, as Antonella has explained. I think it's worth summarizing again what GreenME is about. One of the aims, the main aim of GreenME is to investigate, produce evidence about the relationship between nature exposure, and our mental well-being. Another aspect of the GreenME project is to understand how to scale up what we call green care. And what we call green care has several levels of interaction between people and nature, and ways that nature supports the mental well-being of people. Okay, I manage. So this is uh, what we call green care, and green care is composed in our analysis uh, of three levels. The first one is the nature in every. We call it nature in everyday life, and it's our interaction with nature on a daily basis. When we take a walk in the park, we take the dog to a park, or we cycle to a park and enjoy nature that way. The second level is a deeper level of interaction, and we call it nature-based health promotion. And it's when we engage with activities that are organized and they are in a nature setting. So it can be gardening, in volunteering in a community garden, or being part of a nature conservation activity association. And so it's that kind of interaction with nature that again is deeper. The third level, we call it nature-based therapy, and it's the provision of nature-based therapeutic interventions when we need therapy, and that therapy happens into a natural setting. We are work package 4, and we're not investigating the whole green care framework, but we focus on the initial 2 levels of this framework, and that is nature in everyday life and nature-based health promotion. We also are, as part of the very concerned with health equity. So we want to understand, and that is part of the broader concern shared within the broader project of GreenME, understanding how this interaction is informed by health equity principles. So access to everyone, to every social group, and to every marginalized group in society. I think it's worth setting the background of the Green Care framework, spending a minute explaining it. So this is a diagram from a study, and we borrowed it from there, and it shows the pathways, the ways we interact with nature, and distinguishes 4 pathways, and these are marked in within the orange boxes. So is oh God, I can't read. Reducing harm, restoring capabilities, building capacities, and the one is causing harm. So these 4 pathways, we have these pathways, but we also have 2 ways of interacting with nature. One is that is indirect and benefits from nature again indirectly, especially from the first pathway, reducing harm. So, for example, to make an example, trees filter air, we breathe cleaner air. And so this level of interaction with nature is what we call indirect interaction. There's a more direct interaction with nature with benefits out of the 4 pathways, all of them. And that can be several levels. It can be experienced at deeper levels when we take we interact with nature by running in nature or building capabilities in terms of physical strength, or but also being in contact with nature can restore at a more simpler level without a deeper interaction, can restore our mental capabilities in terms of stress reduction, and attention deficit. There's a fourth level of interaction with nature that is the fourth pathway, reducing causing harm, which is a negative way of response to nature. When we step on a venomous snake and the snake bites us, that would be certainly harmful. But there are also other ways of interacting with nature which are detrimental to our health. So all these pathways take us to an health outcome, and a more immediate health outcome, but also a more medium-term health outcome in terms of improved mental health and physical health. All this to say that what we want to know is how nature impacts our well-being, mental well-being, but we want to do that in relationship to the actual spaces that we visit. So we want to understand what attracts, what is the attractor, what attracts people to these spaces, and what actually at the other end of the spectrum hinders people to experience nature, and if is accessible to all, and that is an aspect related to health equity. And again, are all these aspects equitable? But also we are a 7 countries project, so we want to understand if these conditions vary according to the country. In fact, one thing that I forgot to mention in the framework is that for us it's very important to understand the mediators of the interaction between people and nature, age, gender, and other social cultural characteristics can mediate or can be detrimental to modifying the effect of this interaction. And this is something that we want to understand through our analysis. So what we are interested to understand is that identify the qualities of the spaces that people visit, and understand how these qualities have an impact on the level of mental benefit in terms of mental well-being. We do that we organized a survey for this purpose, and we've audited green spaces that people visit and that we have identified through the survey. We also have produced a mapping out of the data produced, and this is what is my colleagues are going to show after this slide. First the survey, then the audit, then the mapping. And I now pass the presentation to Richard.
Yes, thank you, Silvio. Before we start, we have a tiny survey for our attendees. As you have just mentioned, one of your objectives and main pillars was to understand how people can access green and blue spaces and how do they engage with them. So we would like to ask our attendees a couple of questions. We're not asking for paragraphs. Don't be scared by this. It's gonna be just a word cloud that we can launch now. We want to know first what attracts you or keeps you in green and blue spaces in your local area. And then the second one would be what are the barriers that you're facing. So we will give you a couple of minutes. It's 11:21 Brussels time. So 11:23, we switch to the second question. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Caroline or Caroline, I don't know, for your answer. It would be amazing if you could also type it in the poll, so we keep your valuable inputs and we mix with the other responses. You or keeps you in green and blue spaces. We have trees, scenery, biodiversity, bird songs, nature connection, this sense of calmness. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Cleanliness and safety, which is also a valid point for me, to be honest. Insect life, very interesting. Beauty and life. What prevents you to access these same spaces? Young kids, distance, lack of security, they're only accessible by car. Also, lack of time. If you're busy, if you have a busy schedule, makes sense. Dogs on the loose. I understand. I am a dog owner and my dog is always on the leash. I do not appreciate when they are unleashed. So this makes perfect sense to me. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. If anything else comes to your mind, please, again, feel free to use the chat and we leave the floor to Richard. Thank you.
Thanks, Antonella. Yeah, I'll move on to the next slide. It's good to see so many things crop up in that, which we are kind of tackling directly in our survey and from our audits, things like biodiversity, trees, and Eirini will talk a bit more about the audit later. I'll start off just talking about the survey. As Silvio mentioned, we're kind of linking all these aspects together. So we start off with the survey. We want to sort of retest some of the questions of things that we know a little bit about, but we don't know for sure. So things like about nature's impact on mental well-being. Look at equity in a lot of more detail than other studies have done. Really important to GreenME to do that. And also we're going to create this rich data set for future use by other people as well. So as part of the project, we'll be releasing a public release of the data set as well. And we've collected over 6,500 responses to the survey across all our areas. But yeah, how do we even do the survey? So we actually targeted it in some specific locations that were more marginalized. We collected person level data, and this is health and demographics. And also we did a really interesting interactive mapping module for that hopefully other people can use as well to try and get slightly better exposure data in terms of understanding where people go for nature experiences, what they do, and to try and get a little bit more of an accurate estimate on it, because it's quite a hard thing to remember. Especially if you're looking back, 2 or 3 weeks, people are busy, they don't always remember exactly where they go. So I'll run through that now quickly, just to give you a bit of a background to that. So first of all, we wanted to make sure we were really trying to understand how people are using nature who are more marginalized. So to do this, we actually found some specific areas in all our different countries that we looked at that had more marginalized people based on things like deprivation indices, but also local knowledge. We had some really great stakeholders in the project who sort of knew on the ground where the more sort of marginalized areas were as well. And you can see here how we recruited the number of people we recruited in these areas. So generally, we got a good spread of responses. So each of those little tiny polygons you can see is like a neighborhood that we asked people in the survey to click on when they started the survey. And you can see there's a little scale bar at the bottom which shows you the really sort of bluey areas, sort of turquoisey colors, light blue, I suppose. They're the areas where we got up to 12% of responses as a percentage of the recruitment in that particular wider area. So like, for example, Oldham in England, and generally we got a good spread, and it was around sort of hovering between the 2 and the 5% mark, with a few areas where you got a few more urban core respondents, which you would kind of expect as well, just because they have sort of more people in those areas. And you can see here on the right where our actual study areas were. So we've got like Pembrokeshire, which is very rural, and then we've got sort of more urban areas like in the Warsaw revitalization area, and some sort of more like peri-urban areas as well in Stockholm. And here's just some sort of like a few of the summary results from our survey. We're still sort of in the data crunching stage at the moment, but we want to share some of our initial sort of findings from summary statistics and the kind of data that we collected, which is really interesting. So here's our sort of main mental well-being outcome data. So you can see here on the left side, you've got anxiety, happiness, worthwhile life satisfaction, and these are aspects of a well-being indicator called the ONS4 that has been used in previous research as well. And you can see here we've got a generally quite an interesting spread of scores for that across the different areas. The only sort of thing you can pick out a slightly different maybe, but they're pretty well distributed, I would say, is that in Bologna, Matara and Oldham, slightly higher anxiety scores. To be seen why that might be, we are analysing that data as well. And like I said, these will be our main sort of outcomes for later analysis. And then as keep mentioning, marginalization was a really important thing. So we did monitor that as we were recruiting to try and see if we needed to maybe reach out to certain groups more. And this was through on the ground work as well in terms of recruitment as well as through our sort of networks as well. So we did actually try and reach out to certain groups that might be harder to reach just through an online survey. So they're actually people on the ground recruiting as well. And you can see here, generally the highest marginalization we had in Oldham and Portland, Gresham area. And this was defined by these sort of indicators where you're probably more likely to find people who are marginalized if they sort of tick these boxes, if you like. Although we did have a really useful question, which is discriminated against, which is a self-assessed marginalization score, which we might treat slightly differently in later analysis because it's about sort of self-representation there. Yeah, but profiles you can see kind of do differ quite a lot by area, and that would be expected because of the sort of baseline demographics that you have there. Like we know in Oldham, there are generally more people from ethnic minority backgrounds compared to the national picture, whereas in other areas less so. So we'd expect that anyway. So that's something sort of to deal with later on in different analyses. And I think now I believe you've got a poll as well, just to sort of ask about marginalization and people's perspectives on it too. So I'll hand over to Antonella for that.
Thank you, Richard. Indeed, as we have been listening to so far, we have different countries, and recruitment was one of the challenges that we faced as a consortium. Also, when it came to promoting the survey via our official channels, we wanted to reach a specific target of the population. Not always easy. And it would be great to understand also what type of barriers you think that are the highest to reach for the marginalized communities in your local areas. We will launch now this poll, and please feel also free to write in the chat in case which area are you talking about, if you want to share. Chat is yours, floor is yours. Yes, Steve, thank you for your comment. I think you're right. It's indeed it's very generic. We know that whenever it comes to inclusion and accessibility and barriers, there is this level of intersectionality that we have to consider. However, we could have created 15 different polls, but please share your thoughts in the chat. We see that the chat is being very active. Local governments usually don't prioritize population, besides they are the ones that need more attention. True, there is lack of action when it comes to these situations. I see some polls result, at least for the first question, I think we have some percentage, lack of information and awareness, language, lack of trust. Indeed, it's a mix. We should have added probably the all of the above kind of answer. And then for the second one, maybe we can, yeah. Now, if you can maybe take a picture and we share it in the chat. Okay, sorry, I cannot read it. Okay, so we have as groups of people that you identify, thank you, Richard, as marginalized in your local area, young people, migrant communities, older people, low-income families. We have people with low education status, women, as per usual. We have something related to indigenous people, which is very also unfortunately not surprising, but thank you for sharing. Great, thank you for interacting. We leave the floor again to the colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just move on a little bit now and talk a bit more about how we thought about exposure and how we generated that. So as I mentioned, we had an interactive mapping module in Qualtrics. You can see someone running through it here on the screen. So the idea was that we would get people to click all spaces that they visited in the past 2 weeks, and these are for intentional visits. What they did there, so our 3 different levels of nature engagement that Silvio mentioned at the start, how many times they went, and typically for how long for. And this was a fairly complex exercise for people to do, but it had pros and cons in that kind of way. So we did think about how, you know, people can be biased about recalling how long they spent somewhere. If you just ask them straight, oh, how long have you been in nature in the past 2 weeks? It can be quite difficult just to come up with a number. Whereas if you run through the process, that's a good way of getting a response. And then also we wanted to make it fairly easy to use as well. But so these are different ways we try to consider about that problem. And the great thing about this exercise was that once people were clicked where they went, we could actually link that data again to the GIS data that Sarah's going to talk about a bit later on, as well as the audit data that Eirini is going to talk about too. So we could then go and audit these spaces that people actually clicked on, which gives us a bit of a deeper understanding of their nature exposure. I'll just show here an example of what it looks like once we got the data in for, I think this was about halfway through the survey in Bologna, and you can see here just the different clicks that people made and how long they spent at each point across all activity levels. So you can see here some of the different parks that are there. And we did this for all the different study areas. And this gave us some really rich data on people's time in nature. So you can just see here an example of people's time in nature outside home at the very top, and how this varied quite a lot depending on our areas. Overall, you can see as well time visiting nature at home as well, which is the bottom panel, which I didn't write down. And yeah, it's interesting to see really how those places that were a little bit more urbanized, generally you can see that the nature engagement was a little bit less. Obviously, we're following this up with a more in-depth analysis to look into that. And mostly in those areas that are more likely to have houses had more nature at home, whereas those that didn't had less. So you sort of start to see patterns there in the data that you would recognize as being valid based on your expectations, which is always comforting to see when you're going through it. You can see here a little bit how this is broken down then across those different levels of nature activity that we mentioned before. So generally speaking, as you'd expect, most of people's time spent in nature is an everyday life visit rather than organized activities, but we did get some respondents as well who did that too, so that's kind of interesting as well for us to look at, and we're going to look at this in more detail in our forthcoming analysis. And then how do we use that data to identify spaces to audit? So what we decided that we wanted to get this better quality information about people's exposure. So we selected 50 spaces or more in each study area that captured the most amount of respondents' nature exposure, but we did want to balance between low, medium, and high exposure to nature. So we didn't just, go to areas that we had lots of respondents with low nature exposure, essentially. And there's another example again from Bologna. This gave us places to audit here. You can see here some of the boundaries of the spaces, and this is from publicly available data, but then we refined them on the ground as well, as it had our auditors going in the field. And Eirini will talk a little bit more about that. You can see here this boundary is a little bit off, and that was corrected once they were down there in the field as well. So what I'll do now then, I think the next step is for Eirini to talk about the audits. I don't think, do we have any more polls now, Antonella? I don't think so, right? It's straight back into Eirini,
Yeah, no,
I think. Yeah.
It's still on you guys.
Okay, great, fantastic. I could just double check. Okay, so there we go. That's thank you very much.
Richard. I can take control, let's say. Okay, hi everyone. So Richard has already introduced how we combine basically the survey with an audit tool for the design of the study. And the auditing of the green and blue spaces aimed mainly at understanding better the qualities of those spaces that people visit. And we aimed at covering with this sample selection both places that were visited for longer periods of time or less periods of time, so we don't introduce a kind of bias through this. As we work across 9 sub-areas in 7 countries, as you saw before, it's quite complex to try and manage this study, so we developed we looked into existing tools first that could help with assessment of the qualities of spaces, and also aimed at improving those through understanding aspects of the role of biodiversity, but also perspectives around accessibility and environmental justice, which were core components of the GreenME project from the start, but were also indicated from the work we did with policymakers in earlier work packages as quite important. So I'll briefly mention how we went about looking into toolkits, and one of the existing tools that we particularly focused on is the NEST tool, the Natural Environment Scoring tool, that has been developed by a research team, I think around 2018. And we seeked into understanding its components better, but also potentially comparing with other existing tools regarding suitability. There are quite a lot of tools, I need to say, that focus specifically on physical activity in green spaces, and that was not our primary focus. So that drove the selection towards utilizing some NEST as a core tool. There is also an additional tool that the study incorporates, which is the CLM, meaning contemplative landscape related analysis tool, that we also consider because it specifically focuses on restorative qualities of places. In order to work with NEST, as I mentioned, we focused specifically on understanding what is already there in terms of questions for assessing quality of a space, but also what we could potentially add to integrate those aspects of biodiversity and justice, which are key aspects of GreenME. These, of course, were also relevant to the different potential types of spaces, as we decided to leave quite a broad selection of types to be audited through our tool. And I will explain what I mean with the types in a few seconds. So again, here there is a small reference to our process. I mentioned reviewing existing tools, identifying indicators that were relevant to our study, and deciding potentially on measurement scales for new indicators that we wanted to add. And this is combined with the sampling frame that we aimed at. So we set a minimum sampling of 50 spaces per case study sub-area, which allowed us to reach at least a sample of 500 audits in total. And we also developed a set of tools that can actually make this reusable and easier to use from other researchers and community users even, which we consider is an important part, as it needs to be accessible and easy to operate, even from someone who may not be an academic potentially. And this includes development of an audit guide with like instructions for auditors when they visit spaces to audit, and also like an online version through a community research platform, the Kobo Toolbox, that makes it easier to access on your phone and like perform the audit when you are outside viewing an actual green or blue space. So I referred to the NEST tool, which was our base in terms of understanding qualities of spaces. And I have here like a very, in a summary, the key domains that exist in the tool. So it had a lot of questions, I think around ranging from 3 per domain to 9 or 10. So we could have in total up to 60 indicators in the tool. And these vary from like aspects like access to green spaces to the presence of amenities or like ability to perform recreational activities in the space. NEST has a strong focus on like also the presence of physical elements that allow for certain affordances and activities to happen in a green space. But these are combined with aspects like the presence of significant natural features, which is referring to water, intense presence of vegetation or tree cover in a space, and the presence of natural aesthetics through the materiality and the presence of certain textures or flower beds, for example, in the space. Following, there are some aspects also that could be considered valuable but are non-natural, like potentially cultural elements in a space, but also accounts for like negative perceptions, which are captured through the observation of potential incivilities. These were actually quite hard to describe because, of course, it's very subjective as a category of quality. And we reviewed this and looked into like the indicators chosen to also align with the 2 new domains that we are adding around environmental justice specifically. So in terms of adding components to this tool, we of course looked at what is already there. So for example, there were a few aspects of describing access to a space, especially around physical access. But we adjusted this to include like components around perceptions of safety and like accessibility, which could include like, for example, people facing disabilities, certain types of disabilities. So this way we consider that we're potentially accounting for benefits for diverse groups and improving the current measurement approach. In terms of biodiversity and nature interaction, I think this was a very creative but also very difficult to develop part of the tool, as there are of course, some existing, for example, citizen science tools or easier like simplified ecological surveys, but the ecological survey would be too long to integrate into this. So we considered like 3 key elements: the opportunity to see animals, the opportunity to see or hear birds, and a broader category of a place that enables interaction with nature on site. And this could also mean that you could either touch or come closer to nature if you wanted to. So those helped us to work with the consortium and develop a set of indicators for each of those 3 sub-elements. The environmental justice interactions that I mentioned before, here's just some like visual clues about like considering aspects of accessibility. For example, in certain spaces, there may be enough access points, but not necessarily well maintained. So one approach we took was like to consider both quantity and quality in what we measured through the tool. In terms of safety as well, this was a very debated domain where aspects like presence of light or well-lit spaces were considered positive, especially in studies we see that women value this in urban green spaces. But also we considered including aspects like the social safety, so like the presence of other users or diverse users as a positive quality element for a space. And finally, the community-driven user management is quite important, especially when we think around spaces like allotments or gardens that could be used and enable this level of interactions in an urban context. This allowed us to basically merge these two new domains with the existing 7 domains from Nest tool. And this really simple arc-node graph just tries to show you that we are actually aiming at using this to create a score per domain and eventually bring those together into a final quality score for a space. So by scaling our answers, we managed to create a 0 to 100 scale for each domain, and then use this adding a weighting approach to formulate the final score. A very quick mention to typologies of spaces, because I'm sure if you work in urban planning or like green space design relevant fields, this could be of interest. So this was another big decision, I would say, for the study, but we also wanted to look into potential being more open to types of green and blue spaces that were not necessarily studied before in detail. So we wanted to have a range of spaces in the sample. And we utilized one 11 type typology that has been used before by relevant studies across Europe, like at least comparing urban green spaces across Europe. That includes 2 types of blue spaces, I would say, lakes and reservoirs, river, streams, and marine or coastal spaces, but also has a variety of green spaces that may range from more organized, like urban parks or county parks, to like civic spaces, woodlands, or potentially semi-natural spaces, which gives a bit of a variation in terms of like including spaces that were not initially fully green, or like what may be considered a forested area, for example. We aimed at targeting our sample, but we don't have, of course, equal samples for all, but we did our best to have representation across the typologies for all the countries. And here you can see how the sampling went. So the colors show how the representation of different types across the study areas. And apologies, the names may be confusing. So we have 2 sublocations in province of Barcelona, Mataró and Sant Boi. So you see there we have some marine coastal areas, and also in Pembrokeshire we do have some, but we do have a lot of like civic spaces in Warsaw, for example, and also a lot of semi-natural areas in Bologna. So there is some dominance of certain typologies, but overall there is a variation in what we sampled. And this takes us to the last bit, which is a little bit about the biodiversity. And we wanted us to open the floor here, so I'll give, we created a small poll for you with Antonella to just give you a flavor of like how you would select, for example, from a selection of birds or animals to include in such a survey. This was, as I mentioned, a discussion with the different country members to see like what kind of species may be present, mainly in urban green spaces, but also broader in the country, and lead to a selection of species that we included in the survey tool, in the audit tool. So I can, if we can have the poll, Antonella, that would be great.
Thank you, Eirini. I couldn't have introduced the poll better. Like, thank you so much. It was amazing. So indeed, we're launching a poll. Yes. The idea is to see whether you can spot the intruder in the first batch, and if you can actually spot on the second part of the poll which one is the rare bird, or which ones actually. I needed to see the correct answers. full disclaimer, so I will not vote.
Do we need to abstain as well because we helped develop the presentation? Probably, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't vote either.
No, so it's okay. You can if you want. But we see, let me check here. What do we have? We have 9 replies already. Mhm. I was surprised, to be honest, when I saw the specific color of the parrot. Will not say why, but so otherwise we give away the answer maybe. But yeah, cute. There was there were some replies before in the previous polls or in the word cloud where bird songs and watching birds was mentioned as something that brings people to their local areas and their green spaces and blue spaces. So maybe we have some experts with us today, and they will find these questions too easy to answer to. Let's see. We have 20 replies. We give a few seconds more, and then we see. Okay, I think we can close it and share the results. It really depends on the species in question. Yeah, Siv, I think you're right. I have
So
no
that's
clue
a
about
fair
birds.
a fair comment. Sorry, you can come in here, but we actually simplified. We didn't give you the official names in the quiz. We debated about it, but we thought it may be confusing. So we just gave the simple user's name, which may not be fully identifiable with a species. But I think it's fair, especially parrots and parakeets. Yeah.
Yeah, so you will probably, thank you, Eirini, for covering this. I think you will probably you can see the replies, the percentage of the votes. So as a non-urban bird, we have woodpeckers. Is that the correct answer? Da da da
Yeah,
da. Drum roll.
that's what we
Yes.
also considered. I mean, it was, I would say, a rather subjective decision, but we did we had to, in a sense, reduce how we would report on the presence of certain birds. So this is why this categorization in urban and rare birds came into play. And we considered again what is relevant in the countries included in the sample for
Yeah.
suggesting this.
And
So if you
then
work in a country other than
yeah.
ours, probably this may not be valid in your context. And for the second one, I can see, yeah, I think people actually got it right. That's also what we categorized as rare. Again, there are more data for this. And if we have ecology experts in the chat, please do add your suggestions. We're curious to hear from you as well. Birds of prey and large wading birds are the most rare of those.
Well, thank you so much for playing this game with us. We will continue now with the presentation.
I do have a few more things for you before I
Please go
conclude
ahead.
here. So I mentioned before the scoring. So one of the main aims of using such a tool was to produce a quality score that we could then use also in further analysis, both in visualizing some of our results through maps, but also through giving a link to the survey and understanding how these assessed qualities may relate to people's preferences and time spent in the natural spaces included in the survey. So this is a graph that shows you comparatively, it's a box plot of the nest scoring, nest and GreenME scoring combined domains. And you can see that, okay, there are small differences between, for example, Portland or Oldham Lake having a higher median compared to the rest, but the scores are not too much variant, or we don't have too many outliers. We have a few outliers for Pembrokeshire, for example, and for Bologna. And I would say observable lower average scores for Bologna compared to the rest of the regions, but the others are much more comparable. And again, this is a combination of the domains, so only this score is like an addition of the different qualities, but doesn't show you specifically elements that they may be particularly excelling at. Yeah, and I can give the floor to Sarah.
Yeah,
Please add any questions in the chat.
I don't think so,
sorry,
but do you
I'm
want to
sorry.
launch the
Actually, we do
poll
have a
about
question for you. Yeah.
yeah, about the high quality? Okay, so
Let's do that.
we're interested in knowing what defines for you a high quality green or blue space. So we're launching the poll, and then if you'd like, you have a second part of the question that it might take a couple of seconds more. If you think about your local contextualized environment, how would you assess safety in the local green and blue spaces? We will give you a couple of minutes. So at 06, we will share the results, and then we will leave the floor to Sarah. Okay? Thank you. Okay, we have a few replies. We have 16 responses so far. We can, okay, I can comment on them while you, thank you for sharing. So we have biodiversity and natural elements as the peak, the top preferences when it comes to high quality. But again, I think that all of the above apply in this case too. And then when it comes to assess safety, we have crime perception, the reports of crime, safety for women, risk assessment, lighting, very, very true also, social behavior, open paths, good visibility, for as a woman living in Brussels, for me it depends strictly to the sun shining or the darkness approaching. The assessment of safety, honestly, and it's a pity living 2 minutes from one of the biggest park of the city, but it's a concern, I guess. Again, what we were discussing before, that it's a matter of multi-layers when it comes to safety assessment. Thank you so much again for sharing your thoughts with us. Sarah,
Thanks,
the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, I will move on now here. I'm going to talk to you about a piece of work in Work Package 4 that's just beginning, so I can show you some nice things that we've done already and the plans for what's coming. So Richard and Eirini have given you a great overview of this huge body of work that's gone on and this amazing data that's being created and analysed as part of this work, and as well as kind of key outputs for learning and the project. What we really want to do is to make all of this available and useful, and see it all being used in the case study areas and beyond for decision making, make it usable really for local key actors in our case studies, such as local authorities, health professionals, urban designers, and so forth. So I'm going to talk a bit about that and how we're doing that in GreenME. So in this task, we're making taking all this data and making maps and spatial tools, data products, lots of lovely things that everybody can use and download afterwards to look at the availability, distribution and the characteristics of the different types of green and blue spaces, how they're used and by who, for nature and everyday life and nature-based health promotion. So hopefully these will be invaluable tools. And the nice thing about GreenME is that half of our project partners are non-academics. So we're already working with kind of key practitioners, decision makers, and so forth in all of our study areas, really locally all the way up to national and international level. So that's embedded in the project, but also we're also taking all this data that we have and working with all other kind of key actors within our areas, and really ideally helping to kind of co-produce and shape the ways that we can then disseminate and this data and make it useful for everybody. So we're definitely shaped by the end users of this data and kind of how we can make these things useful, what kind of outputs we can make, what you want to see on maps, how to make it interactive. And when GreenME finishes, as it inevitably will, you know, who looks after all this data and these maps when the project is finished. That's the kind of the legacy thing that's really important for us. So I can show you some maps and that we've made, and really they're very tailored towards who would be using them, and that kind of decides what goes on it. And we've got a poll at the end of this section as well, asking you to think, actually, how could you make use of this data? What would be useful? What kind of key groups, organisations would be interested in using this, and in what kind of format could you use it? So let's have a look. So this map is already available on our GreenME website. This is something that's been made for all the case studies, all the countries that are part of GreenME. We call it our Green Care Stakeholder Map. This comes from earlier work from GreenME. So for every case study region that we've worked in, we've got a map of green care stakeholders within the area. So all these points, these pins, show an organisation that's involved some. So it's really interactive. It's a Google map, and you can click with lots of information about the organisation, what they do, contact details, websites, and so forth. So that's the nice thing about using this, is obviously there's lots of existing data about organisations on Google anyway, and this kind of map can then be embedded or integrated in anybody's website that exists already. So that's why we chose that platform. So that exists. I don't know if someone can put a link to it in the chat, or you've done it already. I'm sure you've already done it. And then on that as well, this is something that we're making at the moment. So not only is it important to understand what organisations exist and how to get in touch with them and what they do, which is this map. I've flipped seamlessly now from Barcelona to the case study in America. This map shows where the stakeholders are and the kinds of level of green care that they operate on. But that might be useful for some people. What might be also useful is the locations that the activities that these organisations run actually are. So if you imagine some kind of green care organisations are based in one site and they run their activities on that site. So that's quite straightforward. But some places are based in an office and they might run activities across 10 different public parks across the city, for example, running nature walks or other activities. So then we're making maps which we are calling service locations. So I'm just going to flip between the two. This is where the organisations are, their kind of offices. You can probably imagine they're a bit more concentrated for various reasons. And then where they operate, and the level of the activity is that they operate as well. So we're currently making this at the moment. There's Sydney in America has done a fab job at ploughing through and getting the American one done. So this two different types of end user for these organisations. So this for these maps. So this might be really useful for potential users of green care, local residents who want to know, well, what's happening in my area and what can I join? So they're being made. These maps now I'm going to show are kind of fresh, hot off the press results from the audit data that Eirini was talking about. For those in the room that are from the UK or from Manchester Oldham, this will be particularly pertinent for you because this is the data that we are going to be showing. It's the stuff that we have ready first. So the black outline is the boundary of one of our case studies within GreenME, picked as having a high level of deprivation in certain parts. So that's what that black outline is. It's a part of Greater Manchester in the UK's Oldham. So I've mapped here just to kind of demonstrate we can make maps, for example, of the types of places that we audited. So all these different coloured blobs that you can see are places that me and Mike spent our summer and autumn auditing using the audit tool that Eirini talked about. There's about 92, I think, on here. So important to point out, I think, that we didn't go to every space. You can't. I think there's a lot. It's not possible on the project, but these were targeted spaces that were highlighted in the survey as having a high level of use by people. So arguably, these were probably the most important places to start auditing in the first place. So nicely, we can start to see where people are telling us they're going. We can go then look at the characteristics of those places. So this is the typology, again, just to show, there's a wide variety of different types of places within a highly urbanized area. We've got huge kind of reservoirs on the right here, which are going into the more rural parts of Oldham, all the way into all kinds of types of different what's classed as green and blue space across the area. So we'll make things like this. I'm just going to show a few maps of the different domains that were made from the audit tool. So here I've made a biodiversity one. So again, this is kind of comparative then across all the places in Oldham. So we can see all the yellow ones are your lower biodiversity places. Those of you who will know this area, you might be able to identify some of them already, which might be interesting for you, and the places that are higher. So this, you can see, there's not many in the higher scorers, which is a shame, and that it's an urban area, so that's purely why that might be. Maps like this then can actually start to highlight where people who want to make changes, make investment, prioritize work programs. This can start to highlight where those places might be targeted. So that's biodiversity. This is a safety one. So it's a bit more of a range across the scores. But again, the important places you want to look at really here will be the yellow places. I think the places that we identified using the tool as being unsafe. And bear in mind, these are places that are also highly used by people within Oldham. So that's, again, these maps and this data can be used to start to target, places where there might be that might be important for decision makers, local authorities, and so forth. Then what will be interesting, I think, and ultimately the power of these maps, and also the analysis that will be done further on, bringing the survey and the audit data together. So you can start to look at qualities of these spaces and connect it with use, levels of use, who's using them. Will we be able to see, for example, it's been brought up a few times, do we see that fewer women use these less safe spaces? And that's a nice piece of evidence there. Or are they using it and but they're not liking it? That's also a problem. So the exciting thing about all this will be bringing all the different types of data together to target that. Recreation here. So again, because this is recreational facilities, so lots of places were low for recreational facilities. These just might be down to the typology type that it is. So it might just be a more rural place or a different type of space. So it would probably naturally have less recreation, and that's okay, I think. But then if you can see the places that have high scores, are these used specifically by, for example, young people, or and what are the perceived benefits that these people have reported to using these places? So some really nice stuff will be coming, I think. powerful bit is bringing in this survey data and also bringing in existing data sets that we know about already, secondary data. So this is, I've just popped on here in purple, it's a data set about deprivation that goes across England and Wales. So here the darker places are the most deprived places within Oldham, and you can just pop then your data sets on top of that and start to perhaps see spatial concentrations of this. Ultimately, these maps will kind of, I hope to identify places of opportunity, places of gaps, hotspots, things like that. So again, these can be really nice visual tools to start to help target interventions. Ultimately, we want to make this interactive. So somebody will be able to go on to access the data, hover over it, identify what spaces they are, look at the data that sits behind it, and have that kind of deep interrogation of the data and what's there. I think that's it. I'm going to pause there and we'll hand it back over to you and ask you our question.
Yes, we have a poll related to this. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your brilliant brilliant talk about maps. You made the maps look interesting for someone who's not passionate about them, so it's great. If you remember, I'm talking directly to our attendees. At the beginning of this webinar, we asked you if blue and green spaces were somehow relevant to your daily work. And now we would like to see whether these outputs that we have discussed or maps in general are something that you have considered using. If they would be useful in your context, we can launch the poll. And then in the second part of it, we want to know how would you use them if you feel like they're actually an asset for your daily work. We give you a couple of minutes. We are aware of the time. However, I think we were perfect. Good job. Our panelists were amazing, respecting their speaking times. Good job. So we get back in 1 or 2 minutes. We give you the time to go through the 2 questions of this poll. In the meantime, we will monitor if we get any replies. And again, if you have any other type of comment or question for our panelists, please use the chat. Thank you. Yes, we have Steve in the chat. Thank you for sharing. Indeed. Okay, we will have a look at the results. We have for the first question, biodiversity, safety, space, attractive, opportunity mapping, London map, care map, green space areas, green care, access points, maps of incivilities. This is quite interesting. Would be great to hear more, to understand more about that. And then for the second one, how would you use them? I suppose it's about sharing them with specific target audiences or to track specific things like local authorities, to do geospatial analysis, benchmarks, quality and access, and biodiversity and nature. Wonderful. Thank you so much again to join us and to share with us your thoughts. I'm not sure if we have more from our panelists. Do we have something else? Otherwise, we have a final poll. Bear with us, but we like to hear from you. Shall we launch it, or you guys have something else? No, we go for it. Okay, so basically this is an ego question. We want to know whether this was useful for you, if you feel more confident about using data and maps about access to nature and exposure to nature. Again, this is just the basis. If you want to share more, if you have comments, if you think if you would like to know more about this, also please do share it with us. You have exactly the contact of our panelists in the slide. You can contact us at info@greenmeproject.eu in case you have specific questions. You can rewatch this webinar on our website at a certain point if something is unclear. It's very nice to see also that there is some more confidence boosted out there. Maybe some of you were already familiar with this type of work. Again, thank you so much for joining us. You know, GreenME is hosting a series of webinars. This has been the fourth one. We will have other 4 coming up. We kindly invite you to join us for this type of chats and talks, and to reach out to us whenever you have a question that can be directed to the project. Sorry about this. Thank you everybody. It's been great. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did from our side. We will close it at in 1 minute, so we gave everybody the time to type in the chat. We don't want to cut people off just like this. It's always annoying when it happens. Wonderful. Then thank you very much. And we hope to see you soon again, and follow us, follow our research. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.